4953, and to ensure public safety measures while maintaining transparency and public access, members of the public may observe and or participate in this meeting telephonically and virtually. This meeting will also be live streamed on Channel 28 and the city's website. Assistant City Clerk, the Lancaster Homeless Impacts Commission roll call, please.
Commissioner Sarah Saras, Latanzi, Hearns, Crabson,
Present.
Paget, Chair Termier. There is not a quorum for the Lancaster Homeless Impact Commission.
Thank you so much. And could you please, Assistant City Clerk, call the roll for the Lancaster Social Equity Commission, please?
Commissioners Carter,
Present.
Cullen, Deloche, Hone, Joseph,
Present.
Vice Chair Pope, Christian Pope,
Present.
Chairman Cannon. We do not have a quorum for.
Okay, thank you. So we right now are going to forego the invocation, and since there is no flag present, we will also be foregoing the Pledge of Allegiance because I believe that would be disrespectful. So with that being said, could we please have the presenters for the home ARP allocation plan to present?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your patience, by the way. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm having a hard time hearing all of you. I don't know if it's my connection. My name is Roxy Karamanian, and I work with the City of Lancaster, specifically in the Real Estate Economic Development section, which was recently awarded a $2.4 million grant. Part of the stipulation of that grant is that we do outreach and get information from all of you and stakeholders, service providers, the community, on how best to use the $2.4 million to address homeless individuals and people who are at risk of being homeless. So we have hired a consultant to help us, Sarah Ferrara. I'm not saying it right?
Ferrar.
Ferrar. I'm just making extra. I'm trying to turn it into Armenian or something. I don't know. And because I'm Armenian. But so I'm going to turn it over to her so that we can move forward with the meeting. And I appreciate all of your patience tonight. And thank you for being here to join us. And we do appreciate your feedback. So Sarah, thank you.
Thanks. My pleasure. You'd think by now we would all get better at Zoom, but there's always some little thing that happens. I'm going to share my screen. I have a really quick PowerPoint. I will make sure to read everything for those of you who are on the phone and can't see the screen. Oops, no, I went to this one. Okay, did that work?
Yes.
Roxy, can you see it? Okay. All right, so what we're here to talk about tonight are the Home ARP funds. This is part of Home Investment Partnerships Program, American Rescue Plan. So what that means is when the American Rescue Plan passed in 2021, they allocated a lot of money to a lot of different departments, and one of them was HUD. So HUD got $5 billion and put it under the umbrella of home. So it's sort of like home, but it's not quite like home. So it's Home ARP. It's a new version. This money specifically is available to assist homeless or households who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, and other vulnerable populations. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Because the city of Lancaster gets a home allocation every year, they're called a participating jurisdiction, and that's why they got this grant. But there's steps involved. The funding allocation, as Roxy said, is $2.45 million. There's about 15%, well, exactly 15% available for administration and planning, leaving 85% program funds available for programs in the city of Lancaster. So, one of the things that has to be done in order to get these funds is the city must evaluate the size and demographics of its qualifying populations and assess their unmet needs and identify any gaps in shelter and housing inventory and service delivery systems. That's a whole lot of words that I read really fast. Sorry for those of you on the phone. Basically, what we need to do is go through and identify what housing is available, what housing is associated with instability, and where the increased risk of homelessness is. We need to identify priority needs for the qualifying populations, and in this plan, explain how the level of needs and gaps was determined. So we're going to get this information through a lot of data that's available and through consultation with all of you and a lot of other people that we've already talked to in this process to find that information. And then it goes in an allocation plan. So, eligible uses. I said this is under the home umbrella, but there's some little differences. So the program funds can be used for the acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter. So that's new. Home doesn't make that requirement. It's also only available for the acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter. There are no operating funds available. So if, as a city, Lancaster decides they want to put money into non-congregate shelter, we need to make sure that there are funds available to operate the shelter once it's open. Another eligible use is home or affordable rental housing. That's an issue, especially in California, to find affordable rental housing. And that's one of the really big databases that we have is lots of numbers on how many people live in households with multiple generations or multiple families, and not necessarily because they love to live with those people, but because they can't afford to not live with all those people. Families that have that spend more than 30% of their household income on rent, those are considered to be unstable. And so all of this is directed at helping people in that situation. Supportive services. If you're familiar with homeless services and with ESG and other HUD programs, McKinney-Vento means something to you. These funds can be used for any of the supportive services projects that McKinney-Vento covers. There's a big list of supportive services available. Also, the supportive services that are defined in the ESG regulations. Also, the housing counseling as it appears in the CDBG regulations. The last one is tenant-based rental assistance. This is probably the one that looks most like a regular home. So that's the assistance program that subsidizes people's rent. Again, helping people to afford housing in the city that they're in. So that's the eligible uses. The next category to understand on this is the qualifying populations. So these funds must be used to primarily benefit individuals and families from the following qualifying populations. Homeless. Again, this is the McKinney-Vento definition. So in the HUD notice that came out about these funds, it's about 3 pages long of describing what they mean by homeless. But the 3 highest level bullet points are lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, will imminently lose primary nighttime residence, and unaccompanied youth or families with housing instability. Also, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, those at risk of homelessness, and other populations such as households requiring assistance to prevent return to homelessness and at risk of housing instability. Again, there's lots of sub-bullets under that. Those are just kind of the high-level descriptions. Now, it's important to remember that the qualifying populations and the eligible activities don't match up one for one. So there are some differences in qualifying populations between those eligible activities. Okay, so that's the basic information. Now I got to figure out how to. Okay, that's the basic information that you need to know about these funds. What I need to know from you guys, because you guys are the professionals, you're the stakeholders out in the community working on these issues. What you see as needs, where you see shortages in these kinds of eligible activities, and also for qualifying populations. So let's start with the qualifying populations first. Who's not getting served, or who's not doesn't have enough services available to help them? Who wants to start? Carol, let's start with you. I recognize your name.
Hi.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. You went through that qualifying the POPs very, very quickly, but domestic violence is a population that has challenges. They have challenges not only because they are homeless, but they have problems because of their poor rental history or their eviction, high rates of eviction due to the domestic violence, that oftentimes landlords will not rent to them. So that is a population of concern that we have. And up here in the Antelope Valley, families finding enough, we don't have a family shelter. We all hear that often, don't we? But not having enough space for families, large families. And, all of the populations we have a housing shortage. We all know that. And this is part of what this money is supposed to help us with, right?
Right.
And so I think that all of these populations need to be deeply investigated as to who are being able to house, who's the easiest to house, who maintains the housing after they are housed, and then focusing on the populations that are falling between the cracks. And I don't want to take up all the time because I'm talking, but I want to make space and share space.
Okay, well, those were good points. Anybody want to add to that or suggest another population? Or I start calling on people.
Well, I'll jump back in then. Seniors. Passion of mine is, we need to start looking more at seniors, that as they get older, they're on fixed incomes, rentals going up, everything is going up, as we all know, and yet their income is not going up. When they lose their partner in life or they have a serious medical illness, they're at greater risk of falling into homelessness. It costs more. That's what I love about the TBRA program and concept being used with seniors, is that it is keeping somebody housed in a familiar place for them, far cheaper than it is if they fell into homelessness. And then we would be putting them in a place that may not be as safe. They may not have neighbors that care for them. They may not be in a facility that would be able to provide the medical care that they would need. And so I think seniors definitely needs to be on our list.
Who is there TBRA in Lancaster?
I don't believe so. I know the city of Palmdale has a tenant-based rental assistance program with seniors, and Valley Oasis has been operating that program for about 5 years now.
Okay, I have a hand up here for Chahid. Did I say that right?
Yeah, well, Shaheed Joseph.
Shaheed. Yes.
Okay, so to be clear, there's only 2.4 million, and we can use to do something, right?
Right. And,
Okay.
and that's an issue. So it sounds like a whole bunch of money, but then when you start figuring out the cost of housing or something else, it isn't that much.
So just somebody who works out here and dealing with this crisis with 2.4 million, if we're going to make something that has an effect on the streets, it either has to go to making another domestic violence shelter that we don't know where it's at, more conspicuous, that can house more. Valley Oasis can probably turn that domestic violence shelter to house more families. But if that costs a lot of money. So I don't know if that 2.4 there, but we need non-congregate shelter. That alone, especially with the ordinance that Lancaster's put into place, that would balance and help out both situations, because we need more places to get single individuals who don't like the dormitory supposed state, to live. So if you got non-congregate shelters that, they got a little privacy, whatever, we can work with more clients to get them from there to, permanent housing. But with 2.4 million, if we're going to make a dent and do something now, it has to go to non-congregate or build another domestic violence shelter. Then Valley Oasis can help more families. And like, too many people know where the domestic violence shelter is. Thank God. And the way they run it, it's been safe. You know what I mean? But, it only takes one individual, one criminal, a domestic abuser to possibly harm them.
Shaheed, we just chased them away.
Well, good. I'm glad you're out there doing that, Carol.
But but I echo what he's saying, that not necessarily we need another DV shelter, and one that will be able to provide services to larger families and non-dormitory style, so that they will be more likely to stay. It's one of the things that we have found. But I agree, 2.4 million, when you break it down, is not a lot.
Right.
And so what's the largest need out there? What's going to provide us with the best quality services to a population in high need that will then, looking forward, maybe stop generational homelessness? And domestic violence does fall into that category.
Yes. And it's got its own category in this program. Shaheed, you mentioned the legislation that the city's about to pass. Tell me about that. I'm not familiar with that.
It hasn't passed. What I've learned is the city council, they might be doing it now at the city council meeting, because I believe it's going on this same time, but there was a Measure H ordinance about, sleeping in public places, which, could lead to a lot more, I want to say, cleanups and things going through the city. So more homeless, so-called displaced from different encampments. So that alone, just to have a non-congregate shelter for that. But like you say, with 2.4 million, we really have to see, okay, how much is it going to cost to build, or we found something to do a whole new domestic violence shelter to free up some of those beds. There's a trickle-down effect. If there's another domestic violence shelter, then that property Valley Oasis has, they can use it for more families, or maybe even that goes to single. I don't know, but we have to do something. If we have to do something, we got to do it now. And 2.4 million, we got to sit down and see how much is this going to cost, domestic violence shelter or non-congregate living, shelter, because we need another one of those. Kensington is beautiful. It's going good, but it's still not enough beds. So, if we can get another one of those, but the developer, does Kensington own more property there? That same developer, will he, can we get something else built there that's non-congregate? Those are the things we need to figure out now. And that's just finance. How much is this going to cost, and how much is that going to cost? Gio has his hand up.
Yep. Gio, what's got?
Oh, hi. Okay, so I absolutely echo what Commissioners Cropson and Joseph had said. 100% agree with that. one of the things that I want to point out, like there are a few points that I like to ask and make, but the first of which is I know that when there are resources that are available for people that are experiencing various different life issues, if people don't know that those services exist, that is the first big issue. So hopefully this funding will be able to combat like some of those hurdles to access, to making sure that people can reach those services, because I know that is a very big problem. The reason that I bring that up is because I know that as we think about generations becoming more diverse and what have you, that also means that there are different minorities that for different reasons might become homeless. So I'm predominantly thinking about, for example, LGBTQ plus youth or Black and Brown youth that are at risk of homelessness. Those are two populations that I just would like to know what is being done in those areas, or what this money could do for them, because I know that is a problem, and I know that there are people that don't know what services exist for them. So that is thing one. Thing two, that kind of translates over into domestic violence, because if a person has to leave their house or home for any reason, then we need to make sure that these services are accessible for everyone that is experiencing some sort of violence or abuse or shame or what have you at home. Secondly, something that Commissioner Joseph had said was addressing the the spaces that people that are unhoused are living in. It is one thing to get someone off the street, but it is another thing to do that process with dignity. And so I absolutely believe that having shelters in which people are able to have their own private spaces so that they can think about their life's challenges and how exactly they're going to be able to combat them, I think is going to be a huge step in the right direction. So possibly pushing for something of that nature. And then this last point that I had is more so of a question, but I would really be interested in figuring out what exactly this money could do to potentially help transitional aged youth. That is the focus of my work in advocacy is young people. And so I would very much like to know exactly what would be done for that sector of the population with this money. How exactly could that be used to help transitional aged youth?
Well, I'd like to jump in, if I may, that LASA just got done receiving over, I think it was 80,000, correct me, Shahib, if I'm wrong, and new funding specifically for the TAY population. I think it's YHDP. Sometimes I get the acronym wrong. And so those RFPs will be dropping in the next couple of months. And so there's a lot of money on the table for the TAY population. And that doesn't isolate out those much needed populations that you're speaking of, the LGBTQIA, and then specific groups, African Americans, American Indians, Hispanics, et cetera. So, and then I'd also like to throw in, because we often don't talk about it, is individuals that are suffering from disabilities or on our ASD, and often they fall between the cracks. They don't know how to access services. A lot of people do not know how to work with them, and we aren't talking about them at tables when we talk about money. So not trying to add to the problem, but if we're going to focus on something, let's look at where there's money from other places that is coming in that's available, and maybe shift our focus of what we're going to spend this 2.4 on something where there isn't this huge, 80 million is a lot more than 2.4 million.
Yeah, I thought that's why I said they just told us what we can use the money for. So, and this money is from 2021. We're in 2022. So let's do something now. That's non-congregate shelter. Figure out how much that's going to cost, or DV. Because like I said, there is a trickle-down effect. If we got another shelter, that property can get used for something else, or more families. So that's it there. With only 2.4 million, those are the two things you would have to address with this. Rental assistance and different things like that, yes, but the thing about rental assistance is the fact of I mean, we think home ownership is generational wealth, when in actuality, home ownership is preventing generational homelessness. And I can go to my family, 10 people that beat homelessness because my grandmother owned that home, and to my father's house now that he left me, that I've helped 10 people here, and domestic, family with domestic violence issues. You're going to come here. That abuser's not coming in this house, So that is, if we're going to go to there, we can't use this money to buy any homes, to create more home ownership this way. We have to go with what we can use it for, and let's do that as soon as possible. Sit down and get those finances together to figure out non-conjugate, this is how much it's going to cost, or domestic violence shelter. And we can, we have the facts and everything that we need to, to show how it's going to impact and help.
Shahid, may I ask a question? Clarifying, please. When you mentioned getting another domestic violence shelter and using the other property for housing, what other property are you referring to?
I'm just referring to the current domestic violence shelter, whatever you guys are going to, if you have a whole nother domestic violence shelter, then that current one, if it's going to still get used, or you can put families there. That's what I mean. You guys are going to always help the population. So I know you're going to figure out what's the best way, since we have a new domestic violence shelter, if that's where we're going. You know what I mean? But with 2.4 million, I don't know if that's enough, because the need.
Stop trying to steal my program, Shahid. We are helping families out there every day. I just wanted clarity for that. Thank you so much.
Very briefly, I had wanted to just right quickly circle back to the question about TAE funding. How exactly would we be able to access that? What routes would we be able to go through to access that sort of funding?
So are you asking nuts and bolts, how is it going to get dispersed, or are you talking about eligible activities for the funds?
Actually, both. Your insight on both of those.
I don't want to cut you off. Gio, but there's a case conferencing a couple times a month. I'm going to send you an invite to the next one. I believe it's this Friday. So not every, because of COVID, everybody's not coming to the meetings as casually as they used to, but the main players are there. So when there's working on the streets with homelessness, a TAE youth honestly is the easiest person to help get off the streets with the programs here. Now, TAE youth don't necessarily, they have their own opinions on how they want to live. So I can't get you your own apartment just like anybody else. But there are places for TAE to go that are much better than the adult shelters and interim housing situations. So I'm going to invite you to that meeting, and you can see some of those. TAE resources, that's something I always, just personally, I'm going to make sure I know those, because seeing a homeless kid on the streets is, it's gut-wrenching. So those are the first ones that I, make sure I know those resources to get them off the streets. So those meetings, even the Homeless Coalition, if you go to that, there's a lot of presentations where you'll hear, this program, from Penny Lane to, even DMH having something they're doing with mental health with TAE, so there's always something, you know what I mean, that and resources. And like you said, that's just people need to know to go to the Homeless Coalition or to this conference, And
Gio, Valley Oasis operates a pilot program called Host Homes. And although COVID all but shut the thing down over the past couple of years, like so many, it is continuing to be funded. And it's a beautiful program that matches up people that have spare rooms in their home. And it's specifically for TAE youth. And if, let's not take up the time right now, but we could definitely talk offline if you wanted to hear more about Host Homes for TAE.
Absolutely, yes. And we can absolutely have that conversation. And before we get too long in terms of time, Sarah?
Yeah.
Oh, just my questions from earlier.
Oh, okay. So let's go talk then about eligible uses and address it specifically to TAE. none of these are really eligible uses that couldn't address that qualifying population. It's non-congregate shelter. We've talked a bunch about that. It's affordable rental housing. That's certainly available. Supportive services, and the tenant-based rental assistance. So those are all things that are not necessarily not available to take. Now, if you're talking about, under 18, not able to sign a lease, sign a contract, then that might be an issue. But all of these are different ways to serve all of the populations, including TAE youth. Let's talk about the eligible uses some more. What about supportive services? What's out there and what's not out there that Lancaster needs for the qualifying populations that we've talked about? Somebody else who hasn't had a chance before I call on you. Okay, Melissa, what do you think?
I think that I'm not a service provider, I'm city staff, so I can't necessarily speak to all of what we have and what we don't have, like Shaib and Carol might be able to speak to. But my part that I might be able to speak a little bit on would be the access to. We can have all the supportive services, but service provider, it's not easily accessed or attainable. There's so many contract agreements and things that you have to go through, jumping through hoops and whatnot with the county to access those funds to get the supportive services. It's not as easy as it sounds. So I think for me, from the staff level, from the city level perspective, it's how do we attain those in a timely fashion and within reason. Again, for us here in our SPA 1, Lancaster, those funds come from the county. They're not as easily accessible as to gain.
And when you say they're not easily accessible by a homeless individual or a domestic violence victim, it's not easy for them to access it?
For me, I'm speaking more, I guess I'm speaking more for the service provider.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of one off the top, a smaller service provider without even calling them up. We may have grassroots providers out here that provide a service or some sort of supportive service, whether that's case management or therapy, whatever it may be. But in order for them to get a contract with the county, let's just start with insurance requirements. That's not easy. There's a cost associated with that. There's a lot of contract obligations that they may not be able to meet. Not because they're not capable of providing the services, they just can't meet all of the out of this world contract obligations that are required from the county. And not always. I think the city is getting better at, alleviating some of those contractual things that I mentioned, but the city does not have access to funds. We don't have the homeless funds. That's the county.
Okay. Good point. Anybody else?
I'm on a roll here. Hang on, one more thing. Just the last part. And again, this is just where the city of Lancaster, the rigorous, really competitive. It is difficult for us, the city, this large entity called the city, right? Mm-hmm. We can't access the funds. So how would we expect for a smaller service provider, nonprofit organization to access this if the city can't access them? We sometimes can't meet county requirements. So how, in theory, are we supposed to have nonprofits like Project Joy, Mom's House, truly access those funds? It's not easy. I think Carol Crabson's Valley Oasis does a great job. It's very limited, though, on who can access those. I'm sure she can speak to how it's not that easy to get access to them.
Now, I will agree with that, Melissa, that the restrictions that come with the county, state, and the federal government funding, and that was a question that I had, is how restricted is this 2.4 million? Is it more flexible funding? Are we going to be able to get wild and creative and innovative? Or does it come with a lot of restrictions like a lot of McKinney-Vento dollars do? But Melissa's right. The other problem with smaller service providers is they need to count on the funds on being paid when they invoice. And there's a tremendous problem in the county and through LASA and other sources of funding, that just because you enter into a contract, you can sit there for maybe 6-8 months. A couple times we've waited till the contract year was actually over before we got one dime of the actual contract for the whole year. Yet we were supposed to float that money. So you have smaller service providers that need that funding coming in. Once they access it, they need that money being able to come in so they can keep their business going. And that isn't always the case. So, but I think that's for another discussion. From what tonight is, I don't know, but I'd be more than happy to share my experiences. No, it's not easy to access. All of it's competitive, and there is a lot of competition out there for any funds right now. And so, it's one of the areas is capacity building, and
right.
If we want to use this 2.4 million to have better, increased service provision and being able to assist other service providers that may not be able to access the dollars from the larger entities because of all the hoops they have to jump through. Maybe we need to look at this 2.4 and use it as capacity building for small nonprofits that are doing an amazing job out there.
Thank you for bringing that up, Carol. I skipped over that one because it's a little more complicated and it's a smaller dollar amount. So there is up to 5% available for nonprofit operating capacity, and up to 5% one's for operating and one's for capacity building. So up to 5% each. And it's intended to help nonprofits that are going to participate with the money in another way. So, for example, if you've got a nonprofit that's going to build and develop a non-congregate shelter, but they have a small organization and they need some capacity in their organization, there can be funds made available to help with that. It's not program delivery, so it's not to pay for staff to actually manage this development project. It's behind the scenes staff. It's the people who are running the organization, and there are funds available for that. And so far, in all the cities I've been working in, there's interest in that, but in the end, nobody puts it in their plan. So if that's something that you see as a need, let's talk about it some more and encourage it to the city to make that part of their plan, because it is difficult as a small nonprofit to meet those insurance requirements, to meet the staffing requirements. You're right, to carry the funds that you've spent on a project. I'm doing some monitoring right now for some other cities in Southern California, and I'm looking at dates that bills got submitted and dates that checks get written, and it's not fair. It's not fair that we as cities ask organizations to take on this work in our name, and then we're slow to pay. So that is a real problem.
That's a detriment to service, and it's a detriment to an agency being able to build capacity. So, if they need support, there's multiple ways that I'm thinking that we could do that, not only from a city perspective, but the larger organizations that do do qualify for the funding could serve, whether it's contract, subcontract to help them get on their feet, or developing some sort of mentor program where organizations that are getting funding and have worked with homeless could mentor these smaller programs, and not only getting grants, but being, how to effectively operate,
Right.
effectively provide the services and operate. So a lot of partnering and collaboration building would be nice.
Mm-hmm. I'm taking notes here.
So I would, this is just part of America, how, you have to follow guidelines, this and that to get certain things. Like, we're sitting here talking about what we can use this money for and how to use it because there's guidelines. When I deal with homeless on the street, that's the same thing. Okay, you got to have your license, you got to have this guideline, you got to do this, you got to do that to get this housing, to get into this shelter. There's rules and regulation. Where there's a will, there's a way. So different rules and this and things of that, that's just something we deal with. Like you say, how do homeless know these different programs? Well, we're on the street. We advocate for them. That's what we have to do. We have to know these different programs. The problem up here is having those resources and having it done. Now, did you guys read the Blue Ribbon Commission? What's going to go on within the next year? Part of those, part of those recommendations is for cities to say, hey, the city of Lancaster, you need 10 million or 20 million to do this project, or not project, but if that's the money coming in as far as the services in your area, I believe they recommend it for a city to be able to have that, but you have to match that money, but match it to the point probably because so we can pay people on time. So if the city has 10 million sitting in a bank that they're getting the funding for now, don't quote me because I just read through that Blue Ribbon Commission, but that's partly part of their recommendation. And that's cities getting more involved in these programs and finding out what's going on. So, and we got a mayor who he can do, I'm going to say this in a way for hope that if he wants to get something done, there's nothing he can't get done. He'll get it done. So we need to read through all these resources and things we could get in our area. We need to have it. We need to know those resources and guidelines so we can get it done. Because I've seen and worked up here where there were grants and things that just nobody picked up. We didn't have a winter shelter here because nobody picked it up. Now we can argue about how much money it is to get that shelter and this and that. But if we know the dollars that are here for that, then we should use it. And we should be able to use it. You know what I mean? That's going to take things to get more involved to know this.
Well, and the winter shelter is a perfect example of a great program where there just simply is not enough funding for the operator to operate it and break out even. I know that one year when we were tasked with that, it was like literally a 48 turnover startup for us and hiring staff. And our organization ended up losing $24,000 operating that winter shelter. And it's not different. And that's why a lot of people are not jumping on that. If we're going to have winter shelters for human beings, especially up in the elements up here, then it would be nice if some of that money could be slated to be able to pay for service providers to be able to operate, not to make a profit, but to at least not to lose money on.
Right. And that's one of the drawbacks on this money is there's no operating funds for shelter. It's only development money.
And again, so now we're having to look at what do we do with that funding that doesn't require operating costs.
Right.
Just a quick question. Are individuals, can other individuals who aren't on either commission speak up if they wanted to make comment, or is that only during a public comment section?
We will take public comment on agendized items once the commissioners are done and Vice Chair Pope opens it up. If everybody feels that they've had a moment to speak, then we can definitely proceed with that.
Okay, so just very quickly, two brief questions from me, and then we will absolutely open up that segment. Okay, so the first of which is, will there be like another meeting similar to this one that includes like many of the actual service providers here in the Antelope Valley? Is that something that can be scheduled? And that is a question that goes to both the presenter, our sister commission, and the city clerk. Is that something that we would possibly be able to do?
There are 4 of these meetings though during the month, okay? Like 4 of them. You got the youth CES meeting where anybody can join to, you know, listen to all the youth providers and all the resources there. Then you have the CES adults, which is you can for all the adult providers. Then you have the family meeting, which is all the family providers in the area. And where at least the federal, you know, all the dollars that are coming in for those resources are tax dollars. They're right there at those meetings. So there's 4 of those. And yeah.
I was only asking because I wanted to make sure that like there was a central place in which someone would be able to access this information. So not trying to cut you off, but just right quick, that question, like,
yes, just so I can answer this. This is our 4th meeting. The first 2 meetings we held was with service providers and those that provided assistance to the homeless. And then we did one this morning, which was just general public outreach for anybody who may be impacted by homelessness. But we also wanted to reach out to this group because you're also connected. So we wanted to make sure that we hit it from all areas. But yeah, the first 2 meetings we held was with social providers and stakeholders.
And just very briefly, piggybacking off that question, what service providers were included in that?
We had a huge list. We sent it out, I believe, to 140 different individuals. And then we even set it up that they could even refer people. So it was the things that you were mentioning: mental health, veterans, Valley Oasis, the sheriff's department, the school district, the churches, great resources, Kensington Place that oversees that. There was a list, and I have the list of people that were sent to, and then the people that actually attended the meetings. So yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And then my second question, just very briefly, is what would be like the recommendation from y'all going forward in regards to like the county making it easier for smaller agencies to get funding? Because I know that sometimes like when we're talking about like intergovernment agencies, it can be a little bit difficult to get on the same page and whatnot, and make sure that like for the people that will actually be applying for those grants and those programs, there is actually one streamline to be able to do that. So I know it might be a lofty question, but would y'all have like a recommendation about how it would be easier for smaller agencies to get county funding?
Well, I don't think this is mostly county funding. This is through HUD. This is federal funding. So It's a little bit separate that we're working on, that we just got this $2.4 million from HUD specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So once we develop an allocation plan, and Sarah can talk more to it, then it'll be up to the social providers to say, yes, I can provide this kind of assistance, and yes, can I apply for $50,000 and I'll help the youth, or can I apply for $25,000? I'll help the veterans, or whatever it may be, based upon our allocation plan that we develop, based upon all the feedback that we got from everybody as to how to best utilize this money. Because that's more about supportive services, I think, that you're talking about. Because I know that there was from our previous meetings, there was a lot of a need about temporary housing for families and rental assistance and affordable housing, things of that nature. And so people back as to what the needs are. So what we're going to do is take a look at what everyone's input is and then develop a plan from that, and then open it up to the public hearing to make sure that we got exactly what people in this community think we need before we present it to HUD. I hope I said that right correctly, Sarah.
You did great. You did great.
Okay.
So Gio, your concern is talking to the county. I'm not sure that as we're doing this plan, we have that opportunity to go to the county and complain. But that's certainly something that everybody in this group should be considering, and anyone who has that kind of connection can consider. So I understand your concern. I just don't think we have the tool for it right now in this group.
Okay, no worries. I just wanted to make sure that we were just like talking about, I guess, like how to streamline those services, because I know that it can be very lofty for people to be able to access like that system.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I know that there are definitely people that are going to have more questions. So right now, let me just like, before we move to public comment, or actually, wait, no, we can go to public comment now. So I now open up this discussion to public comment. And then after that, I will be asking for each commissioner's additional feedback if they have any more questions. But right now is purely for public comment. Let's see.
At this time, anyone wishing to comment on the presentation item, please press *9. I will announce the last 4 digits of your call-in number when it is your turn to speak. Please state your name and eliminate any background noise. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Please press *9 at this time. We do not have any callers at this time.
Let's see. Okay, so sorry about that. I do know that there was, I believe, one person that was interested in asking a question about that. So I guess they got busy or something. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see.
The one person just, their question was answered during the conversation that Roxy and you had prior to opening public comment.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. So are there any final notes from our presenters? I am going to be doing an additional section for commissioner comments, but if there's anything else that y'all would like to say before we move to commissioner comments.
So let me just go back over the process one more time. So we're going to gather all these comments from these 4 meetings. We're going to do all the needs assessment and gaps analysis, put together a plan. City staff will look at it. That's their process to come up with their recommendation of how the funds should be allocated. We'll put that in the plan. Then there's it'll be published. There's a public comment period. There will be a public hearing before council to go over what we found in preparing the plan and what the city staff has recommended that it be used for. There's an opportunity there for public to make comment, and all of you, because at that point you're all public. And there may be changes to the plan at that point or not. And then it goes to HUD. HUD needs to approve it, and then the funds will be available. Now, when we say an allocation plan, it's going to say that the city wants to spend X number of dollars on this particular eligible use. So for example, if they were to say they wanted to put $1 million towards development of non-congregate shelter, it doesn't have to have an address. It doesn't have to have a developer. It doesn't have to have any of that stuff. It's just they're allocating the funds to that. After HUD approves it, then the notice of funding available will come out for whatever the uses are that the city has decided they want to spend that money on. So at this point, we're just allocating dollars. We're not designing or defining projects. Okay? All right. Let's go to anybody else's last questions.
Let's see. With that being said, are there any additional comments from members of the Lancaster Homeless Impact Commission? I will ask for each of your comments or statements by name. If commissioners are absent, then I will just keep moving forward. So with that being said, Commissioner Sarah Saris, I do not believe is in attendance. Commissioner Latsani, sorry, I do not believe is in attendance. Commissioner Hearns, I do not believe is in attendance. Commissioner Crabson, do you have any additional comments or questions?
Just one, that we have an opportunity with 2.4 million. We all know that's a drop in the bucket, but I think with thoughtfulness and really setting our own, maybe agendas aside, that we can come up with a solution that's going to work the best for the people that need the money, that needs the help. And we know, building isn't going to be the answer, but I think there's other creative ways that we can look at how to spend this money to help the most in the best and effective manner.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Crabson. It appears as though Commissioners Paget and Chair Tremere are not in attendance. So Commissioner Carter, do you have any additional questions or comments at this time? Do we still have Commissioner Carter connected? Hearing no.
It does not appear that she is connected.
Okay, thank you so much. Commissioners Cullen, Deloche, and Hone are not in attendance, so it goes to you, Commissioner Joseph. Do you have any additional comments or questions?
No, I just comment, yes. Like she said, we don't need actual development plans, this and that, just what we're going to use it for. I just would have realistic expectations if we're going to allocate it for something. So, 2.4 million, a drop in the bucket, but there's land out here, acres that you can get for a fraction of that, and manufactured homes, to be hooked up for a non-congregate shelter or whatever, is realistic. We don't have to go 15 million Kensington when we can go manufactured homes on land out here that we have. Something we can get done by next year or possibly the end of this year, whenever the funds are allocated. So that's not any hidden agenda. That's not because I work with, no, because I'm looking at what we need out here. There's so many different things we do need that let's just use this for something we can do now. Let's do it.
Awesome. And Commissioner Cannon?
Thank you. And thank you again, Roxy and Sarah, for holding these forums. I was at you guys' public meeting earlier today, and I'll just reiterate that I think it's important for us to come at this issue multifaceted, but we cannot forget, and I think we should prioritize those who need help right now, who want help right now, and who are ready for help right now. And again, thank you both.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Commissioner Cannon. And it goes to me. I will say that I don't have any additional questions or comments at this time. Y'all did amazing. Just very briefly, would it be possible for us to get copies of this presentation sent to our emails?
The PowerPoint? Yes.
Yes.
I will work with Roxy on that. Oh, I owe some other people that too from this morning. Thank you for the reminder.
You are so welcome.
We will get that done tomorrow. Also, one last thing. In the original email that I think you got a while ago, there was a survey link. And so if you would take the time and go answer the survey, it's really a high level, but it's ranking the eligible uses and just gives us some data beyond the comments that we've collected. So that would be great if you could do that in the next couple of days.
Absolutely. And I will remind the members of my commission, especially those that have experience with handling homeless issues or what have you, that it's imperative that they fill out that survey and also just like get back to if they have any additional comments or questions.
Perfect.
So thank you all so much for your time. I very greatly appreciate it. We are going to solve these issues when we work together. And this meeting this evening was a shining example of that. Assistant City Clerk, are there any other public comments on agendized items?
Not at this time.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank our presenters, Roxy and Sarah, so much for participating and facilitating this meeting. I greatly appreciate it. I thank the member of the Lancaster Homeless Impact Commission for joining us this evening, and the members of the Lancaster Social Equity Commission as well for joining us. Let's see. With that being said, I make a motion to adjourn this meeting. The next regular meeting of the Lancaster Social Equity Commission is next Wednesday, May 10th, 2020 at 5 p.m. And the next regular meeting of the Lancaster Homeless Impact Commission is the day after, on Thursday, May 19th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And I don't have a gavel, but this meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, Roxy. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, guys.